Welcome to episode 1 of Writing 101. And I'm sure your next question is something along the lines of,
who are you?
I guess qualification-wise, I'm a critically acclaimed author, or at least that's what the internet bio about me claims. So I guess people who read stories for a living think that I don't completely suck at it. At least, those are the pointless facts that my marketing friends think that I should say. In reality, I'm just a writer like you, and my hope is that through these videos, we can learn how to craft better stories together. This series will focus on the fundamentals of writing because, like a professional athlete, musician, or any other kind of artist, it's constant practice that creates greatness. We'll be sharpening our fundamentals using examples of popular stories along the way to help give perspective to boring theoretical concepts. And this series will eventually cover a ton of different topics. So, without further ado, Part 1. How to choose your opening setting and characters. For setting, it's pretty important to me to show some semblance of everyday life, which is why so many stories begin with something along the lines of,
My name is Guy, and I live in paradise.
Good morning, apartment.
Good morning, James. How are you feeling?
The reason this is important is because it gives the audience a bar of expectation as to what's normal. Is it like our world where people work 9-to-5 jobs?
Oh, my boss would have my ass.
You know, crazy, Jim? Get lost.
Or one where violence is standard? Are there superpowers or magic in this world? If so, who has those powers? What people, organization, or government is in power, and how do the common folk feel about that? Getting this information to the audience early on gives them context not just of the world, but of our protagonist's place in it. Speaking of which, our protagonist, who is a great candidate for our opening scene, because with them, we can set both the scene and the character's traits, personalities, and goals as well. Opening scenes can show your character is goofy and fun-loving,
How now, brown gown? How now, brown gown?
or unusually cruel. It gives the audience a base to know what they're about and maybe also what they want, without spoiling everything and still giving them room to change and grow. Number 2. What do you do if you don't know the rest of your story yet? I hear this a lot, especially from newer writers who are nervous about starting a story because they don't know how they want it to end. The good news is you don't have to. Writers tend to fall into 2 main groups: writers who outline and plan out their story before writing, and those that write each scene without knowing the next one yet. Neither way is superior, each has their own pros and cons, and it mostly comes naturally. If you don't need to outline, that's great. You really don't need to know your ending. Just write your opening with no worries. For those that are outliners, writing scenes is one of the best ways to spark ideas. Even if you end up changing or deleting the scene later, it's nothing wrong with writing it now. Number 3, how to write your first page or scene. The answer is obviously, start with something interesting. But what does that even mean? I've seen people say that a story should always start with action because it's always interesting. I'm not sure I agree with that. The opening of a story is how the audience decides if they want to experience more of it. How many times have you stopped watching a Netflix show after the first episode or even the first scene? Or think of books you put down after one chapter or a single page because it wasn't what you expected it to be about. I think it's crucial to capture not just something interesting, but also to alert your audience to what kind of story they're about to experience. An epitome, if you will. Let's look at a couple that I think do it well, and why. In Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the film makes sure to open with a massive epic battle because that's what the story is. Epic fantasy. And with a lengthy, down-to-earth first act coming up in the peaceful Shire, it's important to let the audience know up front that there will be epic battles in the story. You'll just have to wait a bit. In The Dark Knight, another action film, but one based not in magic and superpowers, but instead of will and wit, the opening scene starts off again giving you that action, but does so with a fun twist that lets you know this film wants you to think. In Ratatouille, the need for over-the-top action isn't needed because it's not an action movie. Instead, the opening gives a quick establishment of the world, then moves on to establish the protagonist, everyday life for this protagonist, and the current issue in his life, which should sound pretty familiar considering that's what we talked about in an earlier video. Okay, thank you for spending time learning with me, and I hope that you check out more videos while you're here. Until next time, keep creating.